Freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez accuses fellow woman Kellyanne Conway of being sexist toward her because, quote, the patriarchy has no gender. We will examine why AOC is wrong about gender, patriarchy, and everything else. Then soccer star Megan Rapinoe agrees with her conservative critics about equal pay, and a judge rules that President Trump can't block people on Twitter. All that and more. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. Okay, before we get to the sex that I want to talk about, which is the sexism and the gender and the patriarchy, we have to talk about the sex that I don't want to talk about, which is this sordid saga of Jeffrey Epstein, because you know how much I hate to point out that I told you so. Yesterday on the show, I mentioned that the left would be framing this as an anti-Trump issue, that this is all about Donald Trump. I just want to point out that the major Washington Post coverage on this today, this is the headline, quote, Jeffrey Epstein was a terrific guy, Trump once said. Now he's not a fan. No headline about Bill Clinton. No headline about the really shady, bizarre past of Jeffrey Epstein. No headline about that. No, it's just all about Trump, which is the only reason they're bringing this up now. And I just want to, on this one point where they keep going back to this 2002 New York Magazine article where Donald Trump called Epstein a terrific guy, I just want to remind everybody that Donald Trump regularly calls awful people terrific guys. This is just, I guess, his way of speaking. He'll, if it's convenient, he'll say, oh yeah, he's terrific. Oh, I really like that guy, even if he's the worst guy on earth. He actually has done it about the worst guy on earth. Back when he started opening negotiations with North Korea, he used the exact same word to refer to Kim Jong-un. Here's President Trump.
We're making tremendous progress. Chairman Kim has been really very open and terrific, frankly.
So we know this is just the way that President Trump talks, especially when he's flattering people. I mean, Trump historically has been a flatterer. He'll flatter people, and then the minute they turn on him, he'll call them the worst names you can possibly imagine. This has been true of Rosie O'Donnell. This has been true of everybody else that he's encountered. I also want to point out there is a lot of weird stuff with this Epstein story. It seems like every hour we're getting new information that complicates the picture. And there are some pretty wild theories swirling around. I'm not going to call them conspiracy theories because I guess they could be true, but I'm not going to say that they're obvious facts because we just really have no idea what's going on here. But the big question that keeps popping up is, how did Jeffrey Epstein make all his money? Because Jeffrey Epstein isn't just rich. Jeffrey Epstein is really, really, really rich. Jeffrey Epstein in 1992 had the largest private residence in Manhattan. Manhattan is the center of the world. Manhattan is the most primo real estate on earth, basically. And Epstein had the single largest private residence on the whole island. There's rich, and then there's really rich, and then there is unfathomably infinite resources rich. And Epstein falls into that last category. And the question you have to ask is, how? The guy's a college dropout. I guess he was at the Cooper Union, which is an art school, art and engineering. He dropped out of it. He then, this is a kind of a weird coincidence, he was hired to teach at a private school, a very prestigious private school in New York, actually not far from where I grew up. He was hired there by Attorney General William Barr's father, Donald Barr, and he taught there for a little bit, and then he left. Then he worked at Bear Stearns, the financial firm, which went under. This became a big part of the financial crisis in 2007, 2008. Then he left under pretty shady circumstances. We don't know why he left. We don't know how he did there. And he started his own hedge fund. And then he ostensibly became this incredibly wealthy guy. I know people who have worked for hedge funds and who have their own hedge funds, and a lot of them have made an insane amount of money. But it's also worth remembering, most hedge funds fail. It's not like, hedge fund, even that term is so vague. And So a lot of people at the time were wondering where did Epstein get his money from? Is he just the greatest investor in the world? I mean, who are his clients? He kept his clients to be a tightly held secret. We just don't really know anything about that guy. And it gets even weirder because now today, from the Daily Beast, there's a report in about why now Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, who was then a U.S. attorney, let Epstein off the hook with this sweetheart deal. Instead of sending him away for life for all of the charges against him, he got 13 months in a private wing of a county jail, and that's it. And he got to leave 6 days a week for 12 hours a day. How did he get that deal? And this is what the Daily Beast is reporting. Quote, "Is the Epstein case going to be a problem for confirmation hearings?" Acosta had been asked. Acosta had explained, breezily apparently, that back in the day, he'd had just one meeting on the Epstein case. He'd cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he had been told, in quotes, to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. Quote, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone," he told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who evidently thought that that was a sufficient answer and went ahead and hired Acosta. The Labor Department had no comment when asked about this. This is the stuff of conspiracy theories. I mean, except it's being reported by the Daily Beast, which occasionally is a sort of mainstream outlet. You know, it's not like this is one of these really fringy sites. As far as left-wing outlets go, Daily Beast is about as mainstream as they get. Now, before we jump to the conclusion that this is all some secret plot by the CIA or intelligence or whatever, it is possible that Acosta was just coming up with an excuse to explain why he bungled the deal with Jeffrey Epstein. I guess that's possible. Before we conclude that this is some crazy CIA plot to, I don't know, to have a sex ring or to entrap very powerful men, it's also possible that that the intelligence community was using Jeffrey Epstein as an asset for other purposes, maybe in the financial crisis. The financial crisis was happening as this deal was struck. Maybe he was useful to them in the collapse of Bear Stearns. Maybe he was useful to them for other purposes. We just don't know. We don't know anything about this guy. And so the theories are swirling around. There is one theory that the person backing Epstein isn't a person at all. It wasn't just this cabal of, zillionaires who all happened to like 13-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls. One theory that Ann Coulter brought up yesterday is that he could have had a state sponsor, that this was a state-sponsored intelligence operation. I'm not saying that's what it was. I have absolutely no idea. Nobody else does either. But the question of how Jeffrey Epstein made his money, who was funding him in the first place, is going to be central to the rest of this case. And so we'll be following this as it builds. Now to get to the sex that I want to talk about. The sex that I want to talk about is AOC accusing Kellyanne Conway of being sexist toward her. Now you might have heard that name, Kellyanne. That's a woman's name. So AOC, also a woman, is saying that Kellyanne, a woman, is sexist toward a woman. The reason why is that Kellyanne Conway on Fox News referred to the recent tiff between Nancy Pelosi and AOC as a cat fight. Here's Kellyanne.
Those 4 female Democrats that Nancy Pelosi is brushing back. I think they're all freshman members. A major meow moment, brushing back in a huge cat fight, really ridiculing them, and they voted against the Democratic aid package.
Meow indeed. Ooh, it was a cat fight. That's not a sexist term. That's an accurate description. This was a particularly snarky battle that was going on between especially Nancy Pelosi and to AOC. Here's how AOC described it. Quote, "Catfight is a sexist term Republicans use when 2 adult women happen to disagree with each other. The reason they find it so novel and exciting is because the GOP haven't elected enough women themselves to see that, in fact, it can be a normal occurrence in a functioning democracy." Meanwhile, the GOP nominated a woman for vice president in 2008, one of our leading future presidential candidates is Nikki Haley, a former UN ambassador, governor of South Carolina. I mean, you could go down the list. The GOP has a ton of women And of course, Kellyanne Conway, the campaign manager for Donald Trump, first successful campaign, a female campaign manager in American history, and a senior advisor to the president. So I don't think that hit makes a whole lot of sense. But catfight isn't just a term used by Republicans. It's a term that everybody uses to describe when two women are getting angry with each other. I mean, you could say a fight between two men is a bunch of knuckle draggers or a couple of Neanderthals. You hear those kind of terms as well. But then AOC gets to her main point, and this exposes the lie of the entire gender ideology movement. We'll get to that in a second, but first, because I know what time it is, I know we've got to thank our sponsors over at Movement. You know how much I love Movement watches. I wear it all the time. I get compliments on it all the time. I've never gotten more compliments on a watch than I have on this one. And I think this is the coolest watch they have, although they have many cool watches. This is the Revolver collection, the Atlas version of it. I just love this thing because these guys, these two college dropouts who started this watch company, just get modern style. I mean, their watches, they're not just totally futuristic. They draw on so much of the past, on those great watch eras in the 1950s, 1960s, but then they update them. So it's not just rehashing something old. They're new, they're sleek, they're just fabulous. Now they have mechanical watches, they have an automatic watch, the Arc design, which I love. I don't have it yet, but I really want it if anyone's listening out there. They're just terrific, a terrific product. And the best part of it is, as far as I'm concerned, if you went into a department store, they'd be $300-400. If you order it online, I mean, because Movement cuts out the middleman, you can save so much money. You can save, you're getting direct prices. And especially for summer, you love their watches. Their sunglasses are fabulous. They make a very fun statement, like the 90s skinny frames. They've got everything. They've got them all. Movement sunglasses have the same advantage. They start at just $60, no pair prices over $95, so you're guaranteed to find a style that you love with quality that doesn't break the bank. They've sold over 2.5 million products in more than 160 countries. The collections are always expanding. You've trusted them on their watches. You've got to trust them on their sunglasses. They just get style. Get 15% off today with free shipping and free returns by going to mvmt.com/Knowles. See why Movement keeps growing. Check out their expanding collection, mvmt.com/Knowles, Knowles. Join the movement. So then AOC follows this up, and she gets to the actual point here that dissolves, I think, the transgender ideology. And she says, patriarchy has no gender. This is how she explains how a woman can be sexist against another woman. She says, patriarchy has no gender. Now, just as a simple point of definitions, I went to the Oxford English Dictionary. I thought maybe I'm wrong about the definition of patriarchy. No, it turns out AOC is wrong. Patriarchy, as defined by the OED, is, quote, a system of society or government in which the father or eldest male is head of the family and descent is reckoned through the male line. Father, male. Okay, that's patriarchy. It does have a gender. So on the surface, AOC's comment doesn't make any sense. On the surface, the gender ideology, transgender ideology movement doesn't make any sense. But there actually is sort of, almost, an internal logic to it. And conservatives totally mistake how to deal with gender ideology and transgenderism. We make the mistake of trying to argue this point on scientific grounds. This is what you always hear. Let's just talk about the science. Forget religion, forget morals, forget philosophy. We just want to talk about the science or the chromosomes or the biology or whatever. I know that's tempting because scientifically our points are correct, but gender is not a scientific concept. The way that the left is talking about gender, the way that AOC is talking about gender and patriarchy is not scientific. Gender is not a scientific term. Gender was a term that was never applied to human beings in popular culture until about the 1960s. Gender was a term that was applied to language. You have gendered language, really not so much in English, but in other languages. So for instance, Latino has a masculine gender. Latina has a feminine gender. Pizza, the Italian word pizza, it ends in an A and it's got a female gender. But I don't know. Pranzo, which is the Italian word for lunch, It ends in an O, and it's got a male gender. The gender is a language term. The entire purpose of the left making gender into a description of people is to undermine science. It's to separate sex from gender. You hear this all the time. I talk to conservatives all the time on campuses around the country, and I think even many conservatives believe this. They believe that there is a difference between sex and gender. I mean, in their defense, this is what they're taught in classrooms. This is what kids are now taught from kindergarten all the way through college or graduate school. The thing is, there is no difference between sex and gender. You can lock that away with the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. Sex and gender have no difference. We just have sex. And I can prove it to you. I can give you the argument that you can use to show this to any leftist. I can do that in a second. But first, we have got to thank another sponsor, Ring. You know how Ring makes neighborhoods safer. I've told you about their smart video doorbells and their cameras that protect millions of people everywhere. Ring helps you stay connected to your home anywhere in the world. So if there's a package delivery, or if there's a surprise visitor, either a burglar or your mother-in-law, whichever one is worse, you will get an alert. You will be able to see, hear, and speak to them all from your phone. And that's thanks to the HD video and two-way audio features on Ring devices. Our senior producer, Jay Hay, was in his house, this was a few months ago at this point, lying there with his lovely wife, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he gets an alert on his phone. He sees someone's at the door. It's these two drug-addled weirdos who, Jay Hay lives in a kind of remote part of town. They didn't just happen to be walking down the street. They were casing the joint. They wanted to break in. They wanted to see if anybody was home. He picks up, he says, "What are you doing at my house?" They come up with some weird, lame excuse. They're stammering. Then they run away. Now, Jay Hay was home in his bed. That's where he answered that from. He could have been at the office. He could have been on a beach somewhere. It doesn't matter. You have access to your home from anywhere. It's an amazing product, not only because it makes you safer, not only because it's like neighborhood watch for the 21st century, but because you will feel like the Jetsons. I mean, that's what I love about it. That's why I feel safe with Ring, is I feel like I'm just living in the future, you know, and I whenever my friends get a new house, whenever they move into a new place, my housewarming gift is always Ring. Part of the reason for that, too, is it's an amazing value. It's a great deal. I don't need to spend $1 zillion on getting them a housewarming gift. I can give them a Ring. I know they're going to feel cool and they're going to feel safe. As a listener, you have a special offer on a Ring starter kit available right now. With a video doorbell and motion-activated floodlight camera, the starter kit has everything you need to start building a ring of security around your home. Get it today. Here's how you do it. Ring.com/Knowles, Knowles. Ring.com/Knowles. So even conservatives fall into this trap. We buy the leftist premise that there's a difference between gender and sex. Or if we don't, maybe we don't want to grant that premise, but we try to argue about it scientifically. There's no scientific argument for it. Here is how, I've talked to so many left-wingers about this. They can never answer the ultimate questions. Here's how the argument goes. This is what the left says. They say sex is biological, but gender is not biological. It's a social construct. It's psychological. It's not physical. It's not the same as sex. But if gender is just a social construct, if it's just sort of a choice, then people should choose to make their gender conform to their biological sex, right? If you can just kind of choose your gender and it's just a matter of your personal will, then if you're biologically a man, but you identify as a female, and that's just a choice, then you should just choose to identify as a male. That's much easier than going through all this awful surgery, mutilating yourself, changing every single bathroom in the country, right? Of course. But then what the gender ideologues will say is, it's not quite like that. Sex is in the body, in, you know, the chromosomes or the genitals or whatever, but gender is in the brain. Okay, and you can't change your brain. Well, okay, except then that means that gender is biological. Then it's not a difference of biological and not biological, because the brain is the part of the body. The brain is probably the most important part of the body. So then you have to conclude sex and gender are both biological. So how can your biology be both male and female? How can your biology be both you are a man and a woman? except in the exceedingly rare case where there's some confusion in chromosomes or in genitals, which is not what transgender ideologues are talking about. How can it be both one thing and not that thing? So this is what they're coming around to now. This is the new stage of gender ideology. And it's where you hear phrases like biologically female penises. I had a gender activist tell me once at the University of Michigan, she said, yes, of course there can be biologically female penises. And of course there can be biologically male uteruses. Biological. See, because they want the language of science. But if that is the case, then the words male and female, the words man and woman, have no meaning. Because the word male, in that case, can refer to either male or female. The word man can refer to either man or woman, and vice versa. It's not that you're even changing the definition of the word so much as you're just getting rid of the words altogether. Now, they get very confused on this and they always run away and they can't answer these questions. But I actually see what they're trying to talk about. What the gender theory people are trying to describe is not a scientific characteristic of people. They're trying to describe the soul. They're trying to describe the difference between my physical body and my metaphysical soul. So what the transgender ideologues say is, on the physical level, I look like a man. You know, I got broad shoulders, I got a beard, I've got everything below the waist that makes me look like a man. But at a more essential level, deep, deep down, somewhere that you can't see, I'm not really what my body says that I am. I'm something else. There's a difference, they say, between me and my body. And this is not a totally new question. I mean, we think of transgenderism as this bizarre new idea. It's just a bizarre new version of a very old idea. This question of what's the relationship between me, my soul, and my body is as old as time. And this question took on special significance during the time of René Descartes, the philosopher who established dualism, mind-body dualism, the difference between the mind and the body. This laid the foundation for the Enlightenment. This gave us a lot of our modern problems. And without getting too into the weeds here, what Descartes said is that the body, my flesh and bones, is not essential to my identity. Sorry about that. The feed went down. I assume it's the deep state and the CIA and the intelligence people and Jeffrey Epstein. But either way, we'll pick up where we left off. This is the central question of the gender theory. This is the central problem. Is a question as old as time. What is the relationship between me and my body and my soul? And this question took on special modern significance with René Descartes, with the father of modern philosophy, who laid the foundation for the Enlightenment and who consequently gave us a lot of our modern problems. What Descartes said is that the body is not essential to a person's identity. So my body, I've got sort of swarthy skin, I've got a little bit of a Roman nose, I've got some poofy hair. That is not essential to my identity. That's just sort of accidental. What I really am is immaterial. My body exists as a machine, and then my soul, which is who I really am, exists as a ghost in that machine. Now, I don't really believe that. That's what a lot of modern people think. That's what Descartes thought, and that's what these gender ideologues believe. But this isn't the traditional understanding. The traditional understanding of the body, the Christian understanding, Aristotle's understanding, Thomas Aquinas' understanding, is that the body is essential to a person's identity. Now, there are a lot of weird theories that have popped up throughout history to say that the physical world is evil, the physical body is evil, matter is evil, and therefore we should divorce ourselves from the material world. This has cropped up as a number of bizarre movements and heresies and things like that. Those ideas have always been defeated because civilization would collapse if we really believed that. If we really believe that everything physical is just evil and terrible and awful and has to be utterly rejected, you can't have a civilization. You can't have a society. You can't even move around in your own body. But that's what the gender theory people believe. They're searching for a soul, but they can't bring themselves to admit that because they also tend to believe that there's no such thing as a soul. So they're stuck in this awful place where they're arguing the extremes of two ideologies, both of which are completely wrong. I think I know how we can deal with this. I think I know how we can talk to people about the gender ideology that isn't just, look at the chromosomes, look at the science, because I think ultimately that doesn't really go anywhere. We'll get to how to deal with them in a second. We will also get to Megan Rapinoe. I guess it must be a chilly day in hell because I'm actually agreeing with the soccer star on one question. And then we'll also get to why President Trump can't block people on Twitter. But first, you've got to go to dailywire.com. It is $10 a month, $100 for an annual membership. You get me, you get the Andrew Klavan Show, you get the Ben Shapiro Show, you get to ask questions in the mailbag, you get the Matt Walsh Show, you get Another Kingdom, you get all of these wonderful things. By the way, get your mailbag questions in for tomorrow. But you get the Leftist Tears Tumbler, and you are going to need that Leftist Tears Tumbler because as the Jeffrey Epstein case starts unveiling, exposing all of these powerful Democratic men, perhaps including a former Democratic president, the tumbler, you're going to drown. You're going to be flooded out and drown if you don't have the tumbler. So go to dailywire.com. We'll be right back with a lot more.